Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 11th, 2021 meeting for the Planning Board for the Town of Chatham. My name is Catherine Halpern. I'm the chair of the Planning Board of the Town of Chatham. This meeting is being conducted remotely, and I will be reading some points regarding that in a few moments. It is being broadcast live on Channel 18 and is being recorded and will also be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing. Before we get started, I'd just like to ask anyone who's connected to the meeting, if you're not speaking, would you kindly mute your phone or mute the audio on your computer? And also, please, if you're connected by computer, please disable your video. That helps with the clarity of reception. And let me go ahead and read a few points about our remote participation. So if everyone could mute their audios and please disable your video if you're not currently speaking. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A 18, and the Governor's March 23, 2020 order, imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Chatham Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410. That's 1-508-945-4410, and the conference ID number is 992-854-778 £. That's 992-854-778 £. You can also join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams by using the link that's in the agenda that is posted on the Planning Board page on the town website. Despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. And as I mentioned, a recording of this meeting will be posted on the town's website as soon as possible. And in the event that anyone inadvertently becomes muted, please press *6 on your phone. And again, just a reminder, it helps with the clarity of the broadcast. If anyone who is not speaking, if you could mute your phone or mute the audio on your computer, and if connected by computer, please turn off your video. So there's a few procedural steps I'll go through. In a moment, we will start off with a roll call of all board members. Also, I will ask that any non-board members, when you're speaking, if you're recognized by the chair, please repeat your name before you begin speaking. And if you're connected by telephone, please give the last 4 digits of your phone number. We just need to be able to clearly identify all speakers. And also, after an agenda item has been discussed by the planning board, I'll request to see if any non-board members, members of the public, have any questions or comments that they'd like to make. The planning board will be taking all votes tonight by roll call, and at the end of the meeting, we will close the meeting with a verbal confirmation of the adjournment, and we'll note the time of adjournment. So let's start out with the roll call of the meeting. Before I do that, I just wanted to say to everyone on the planning board and everyone in the public, I hope that everyone enjoyed a good holiday season, and happy to see you all back. And also I wanted in particular to note that Tom Gagan is present at our meeting tonight. And Tom, I just want to say how happy I am, and I think all the board is happy to have you in our meetings again, and I hope you had a good holiday season. So let's do the roll call. Art Sprue, are you present?
Art Spru, present.
And Warren Chain, are you present?
Warren Chain, present.
And Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan is present.
Great. And Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Chapter is present.
And Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus is present.
And Roger Griffin.
Present, Roger Griffin.
All right. And Catherine Halpern, I'm also present. And before we begin with our agenda items, may I ask if any of the planning board members need to recuse themselves for any items on tonight's agenda?
Catherine, Tom Gagan.
Yes.
I need to recuse myself on my item number 1, which is the minutes for December 14th. I was not present at that meeting, so I cannot vote one way or the other. I would abstain.
All right. Thank you very much, Tom. All right. So that is the first agenda item, is the December 14th minutes. I'll go through the board, see if anyone has corrections or additions. Art Spru.
Catherine Art Spru, just one slight correction. It's for the last motion to adjourn. If you read the motion there, it says seconded by Mr. Spru to recommend Mr. Spru to adjourn. If you delete to recommend Mr. Spru, I think we'll be good.
Yes. Good. Great. Thank you. Good catch. Warren Chain, any corrections or additions?
Warren Chain, no corrections, no additions.
And Tom Gagan was not present, so Bob Wirtschafter, any corrections, additions?
Corrections, no additions.
Thank you. Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus, no corrections or additions.
Roger Griffin?
Roger Griffin, no corrections or additions.
And I had no corrections or additions. So may I have a motion to approve the minutes with the correction made by Art Spru to eliminate the words in the final motion to eliminate to recommend Mr. Spru?
Art Spru, I'll make that motion.
And could I have a second?
Warren Chain, I second.
All right, let's do the roll call vote. Art Spru?
Art Spru, approve.
Warren Chain?
Warren Chain, approve.
And Tom Gagan is abstaining, but go ahead and abstain, Tom.
Tom Gagan abstaining.
Bob Wirtschafter?
Bob Chapter approve.
Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus, approve.
Roger Griffin?
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine, and I also approve. All right. The next item on our agenda is a preliminary site plan review, a pre-application conference for Zero Enterprise Drive. And this is for the proposed construction of a 4-bay warehouse use building. And do I have a presenter for this matter?
Good afternoon, Thad Eldridge here.
Hi, Thad. Please go ahead.
Thank you much. So as you mentioned, this is the pre-application conference for a 4-bay proposed warehouse located on Enterprise Drive. We're proposing a conforming structure on a conforming lot where the green area coverage is more than the 20% that's required. The pre-application, Ally had brought up that the westerly parking space may be too close. The moment we take that 27.0 out of there, that car will be able to pull forward to a compliant parking space. Otherwise, we have proposed septic system for bathrooms within the bays, proposed utilities going, proposed drainage. The grading is a little excessive almost. I mean, it's 1/10 of foot contours because the lot is so flat, but that's why they're dashed. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. And Ally again has prepared a very thorough staff review. I'll just mention that I'll go through the board and see if we have any questions. And then we will go through our site plan review criteria and just evaluate each item. Remember, this is just a preliminary, a pre-application conference. One issue that Ally mentions in her staff report is the issue of parking spaces. Maybe I'll go ahead and just ask that question, Thad. And let me read, Ally mentions the applicant is proposing 8 parking spaces, inclusive of 1 handicap parking space. And it's recommended that we use the calculation for wholesale storage or warehouse business. And this requires 1 space for every employee in any wholesale storage or warehouse business, plus 1 for every 2,500 square feet. And so I'm just wondering, Thad, do you know, can you give us the total square footage of these 4 bays, first of all, and then what will the situation be with the employees?
So each bay is about 1,000 square feet. And
Okay,
these are storage. We are expecting some of these bays to be used by folks with too many toys to be able to store their boats, their kayaks, other equipment. Some of these may be utilized by, the real workers. And it's really for storage. We would expect no more than 1 employee per bay at any given time.
so possibly 4 employees at a time, and if 4,000 square feet, so it's not quite twice 2,500. So
With
you're
the
looking
8
at,
parking spaces, we're more than covered.
yeah, more than covered. Okay, great. That's great. Great. So Art Sprue, do you have questions or comments for Thad?
Art Sprue, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, I have a few comments for consideration when we see the final site plan application. I went out there and took a quick look at the project and how it relates to some of the surrounding sites. It's interesting. It looks like it's a duplicate of the site that's right adjacent and south to it, just a mirror image of it. So one of the things I picked up on is that site has just a single driveway access, 24 feet or so entrance way, and I'm wondering why that shouldn't be considered for something like this. I know some of the other sites there had large accesses to the roadway, but it's usually not a safe way to go about doing it, especially on a curved section like this. It's just one thing for consideration. If you do provide just a single drive access, what that'll do is allow for an island to be placed there, similar to the adjacent site to the south, and remove some of the impervious area. I'm assuming that the surface is going to be a bituminous concrete, and if that's the case, that'll help with mitigating some stormwater runoff.
We did review it because it's on the curve. That makes it a lot more difficult. When you look at the bays on the west side, how would you maneuver in and out from those parking spaces? And we've really emulated pretty much every other bay situation out here where we have parking spaces that go directly to the roadway.
Yeah, I noticed that stat, Ted, and I'm not suggesting that is something that you should do, but from the standpoint, I'm looking at it as from mitigating some of the stormwater runoff. The other thing I'm interested in is making sure that whatever type of contours that you're using here, that you're collecting and you're putting it into your catch basin. I see some of the contours going down into the catch basin, which is in front of the property on Enterprise Drive, which is a town roadway, and we shouldn't be collecting stormwater from a site itself. That should be reserved for the roadway drainage of Enterprise Drive itself.
Absolutely, and as you'll see from the contours, it's been designed with a berm in the front so that all of the stormwater generated within the street will remain in the street, and all the stormwater generated from the site will remain on the site.
And the last point is at the rear of the property. They're showing a wall in the back there. When you submit the final, I think you should submit information to show the, the wall material, construction, and the limits of it. You show it actually what appears to be ending at the corner, at the southeast corner. I took a look at that. Are you assuming that the runoff from the adjacent property is going to be cascading down that slope there that you provided? And if that's the case, you just need to account for it in your stormwater calculations. That's all. Other than that, it's the usual stuff like lighting and things like that. Oh yeah, one more.
Yeah.
The roof runoff should be going into dry wells. So that should be something else that you should identify and show on your final. But that's it, Catherine.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. Warren Chain, comments, questions for Thad?
Yes, Ed, this is Ron. Just a couple of questions. I assume that what you got shown on the plan here is a loading dock for each of the warehouses. Is that what that is representing on the?
It's really just a large garage door, like.
But would they be raised up what, the height of a typical truck bed, or are
No.
they going down to the ground?
They're going right down to the ground.
Okay. And question, if you've got parking spaces in front of all of the entrances that would be for commercial use, is that an issue? I mean, you'd have to go out and move cars just to get your stuff in or out?
You'd have to plan ahead, that's for sure.
Okay, but it's not likely to be an issue to the people that are likely to be tenants?
We haven't seen similar issues with the other bays where the toy box right around the corner, the North Chatham warehouse right behind, all of these are very similar layouts. The parking space is out in front, one access door, one garage door, and that's what people get.
Okay. Well, I was just curious. I did not go around and try and just ask the others if they had an issue. But it just seemed that there might be enough room on this site to have some parking that wouldn't necessarily be in front of a warehouse. I know that I don't believe that there is any street lighting on Enterprise Drive in this area. Is that so?
I'm not aware of any.
And so, question: I don't know what lighting is proposed for the warehouse buildings, but it perhaps ought to be proposed with a consideration either that there would or would not be a street lighting. At the moment, you can see around the curve as you come up to it. I'm not sure that that is going to necessarily be exactly the same once you build the warehouse. And it was mentioned a little earlier that it is likely to be concrete for the area in front of the warehouse. Is that so, or would a permeable material be adequate, be it gravel or something else?
No, we'd be looking to pave the whole thing.
I'm sorry?
We'd be looking to pave the driveway.
Okay. And so then the only question was, again, whether the stormwater runoff calculations at all are adequate, because there's a whole lot of water that's really heading to your catch basins. Mm-hmm. And I know that this whole site here is essentially contiguous to a bunch of wetlands, and I'm not familiar or aware of it, whether there are any particular sensitivities as a result of this part of Enterprise Drive. But I'm sure you are. But no other questions from me.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Warren. Tom Gagan?
Yes, Catherine, Tom Gagan. Thad, I think what Warren just said, I was down on the site today, and you can see around the corner, but you don't have this future building going up. Could there be some consideration given for some exterior lighting in the northwest far corner towards the road and northeast corner of that building that would come on? It could be obviously set for dawn and daylight, morning and evening, just so that when you came to that curve from either direction, that there would be some illumination in that area. The very corners of those buildings might be adequate. How high is that building, each of those bays, going to be, please?
I believe it was a 12-foot door that's going in.
12 feet wide, 14 feet high, and
12 feet wide, 14 feet high
the doors.
is the door itself. And so it's pretty similar to the toy box that's right behind.
But the actual height of the building is going to be higher than 12, so would you say 18? Not,
It's gonna be 20 feet high.
It's going to be a good 20 feet high.
again, pigtailing on what Warren's concern is, if these lights on the corners, northeast, northwest, were up 18 feet, they could really help illuminate that corner with their elevation. It's a suggestion.
It'll be considered.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bob Wirtschafter, do you have questions for Thad or comments to make on the plan?
Very few. The lighting that you put in those two corners, may I suggest they're on a motion detection, so they're not on all the time? Because it seems to me to be sort of silly to light those two corners for every hour of the night for the very unoccasional traffic that might go through there. So the only other question I had, Thad, is I guess I'm thinking that if I'm coming into one of the two middle bays with my boat, everybody else has got to move their cars while I do that?
No, the parking would be exclusive. So for your middle bay, you would have the two parking spaces in front.
But let's say somebody's parked on the outer ones, don't they have to move their cars for me to get my boat into one of the middle ones?
So the two parking spaces that are in front of your bay would be exclusive for you. Nobody should be parking there unless you've given them permission. And if you have, then you can ask them to move while you put your boat in.
Okay, but I'm not worried about my spaces. I just don't know how, could you trace with the tracer where my boat goes to get to the middle bay and how it doesn't have to worry about a car in either of the outer bays?
I can certainly provide that.
Because it just doesn't look like there's enough space that is road in front of those cars to get me to my bay without having that car out of the way when I go through there.
But all of that is space. So if you look at those pickup trucks, they could drive straight down to the road.
Oh, okay.
So the proposal is for.
Okay, so that's all going to be blacktop.
Yes.
Okay, that I missed that. Okay.
Any other questions, Bob?
Nope.
Okay, great. Bob Dubus.
Well, I don't want to bust anybody's bubble, but that is an industrial park. So the pavement that goes out makes it just like every other one of those bays, except for one or two that had the one driveway that was able to go in and out. But I also believe that Enterprise Drive is a private road. And I'm against making one person put on lighting for that corner that people have been going around there for nigh on 45 to 50 years. And it's not a speedway. Nobody else has lights on there, or if they do, they did it on their own. You can't make somebody put lighting for the street on there. I'm against that. Not that I'm against lighting the street, but I'm against making one person pay the way for a street. I think the concept is very well put out. I know the area very well. I don't see the downspouts, but I'm sure that Thad will put them in there. And I see the water main. I'm just wondering, Thad, if you know if the sewer's going down there in the near future, since they're working on the road, or is that going to be put off for about 10 or 15 years?
I'm not sure. I know that they've dig saved out there recently, and there's hope, but I've gone to the town website with the schedule, and I have not seen anything.
Oops, hang on there. I hope, yeah. Thad, I believe they're also going to put a new water main down there, so that might be what the blackout is, in conjunction with the sewer, maybe.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments, Bob Dubus? Bob Dubus? All right, I guess you're done.
Wait a minute, no, can you hear me now or not?
Yes, now we can hear you. Go ahead. Now you're good.
Okay, I just think some of that mark out might be for extension of the water main.
Very good.
All right, I'm done now. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Roger Griffin, any questions for Thad or comments?
Well, the only questions or concern I had is that if any of these warehouses were being used, or warehouse space was being used for anything that was pallet quantities, would be difficult because you don't have a dock and the carrier is nowhere to break it down other than, in the parking lot, would there be enough room? But if we're not really looking at this being used for really, any sort of smaller business entity, then I think we're fine, because I guess what I'm saying is if you had someone coming in and you don't have a dock and they even have one or two pallets, there's nowhere to drop it off and you have no dock. So obviously it has to be unloaded by hand. It's going to take time. That truck's going to have to somehow get off that street because it's a tough corner. So I think that would be a concern. But since it seems to be very little, if ever, anything coming in with pallet quantities, you should be fine. But, that would be a tough corner to have someone sitting there unloading 4 or 5 pallets by hand in that corner, because I know that park pretty well. And wow, sometimes it gets pretty congested on that corner. That truck would have to get off the street somehow. But since we don't have anyone coming in there with pallet quantities, I don't really see a concern.
Okay, this is Catherine. Thank you, Roger. So I'm just going to, for the board, I think we've discussed this pretty thoroughly. I'm just going to read through our site plan review criteria just to remind everyone. And I'll just ask board members, just raise your hand if you feel there's additional comments on any of these criteria. So number 1 is adequacy and arrangement of vehicular traffic access and circulation, including intersections, road widths, pavement surfaces, dividers, and traffic controls. I think we've considered that. Number 2 is adequacy and arrangement of pedestrian traffic access and circulation, walkway structures, control of intersections with vehicular traffic, and pedestrian convenience. I think that's pretty self-explanatory on this plan. 3 is location, arrangement, appearance, and self-sufficiency of off-street parking and loading. And we've considered that, and there is sufficient parking provided. Number 4, location, arrangement, size, design, and general site compatibility of buildings, lighting, and signs. And it is definitely compatible. We've considered lighting, and we're not requiring specific lighting, as I understand, but some points regarding the lighting have been suggested. Adequacy of stormwater and drainage facilities, we've discussed that. adequacy of water supply and sewage. That's also been considered. 7, adequacy, type, and arrangement of trees, shrubs, and other landscaping. We haven't really considered this, but this is an industrial park, and in general, there is not landscaping added. In the case of apartment complex, this one is not applicable, so we'll skip that. Number 9, protection of adjacent neighboring properties against noise, glare, unsightliness, and other objectionable features. This usage is compatible with this area, and I don't think that this is a problem. And fire lanes and other emergency zones, point 10, that is provided for. And 11 is special attention to adequacies of structures, roadways, and landscaping in areas with susceptibility to ponding, flooding, or erosion, and that is also not a consideration here. So unless there's any other comments of the board, this is a pre-application conference. It's not a formal site plan review, so we could vote to accept the pre-application, and then the applicant will have 4 months to bring us their formal application. One thing we'd want to consider too, and I'll go through and ask the board members, we have 2 things. We could consider a public hearing. My personal opinion is I don't think it's necessary in this case, but I will ask all of you. And we could also consider whether we'd like to schedule a site visit altogether as a board. So let me just ask each of you about site visit and public hearing. Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, I don't think a public hearing is necessary for this. I was out there to visit the site. It's pretty much a flat piece of property, undeveloped, so there's not much to see. I don't need to go out there if there is a site visit scheduled.
Okay, thank you. Warren Chain.
This is Warren Chain. I don't think a public hearing is warranted for this. I also don't think a joint meeting out there at the site is necessary. It's an extremely open, accessible, and basically simple to understand layout of the proposed warehouses, and anybody who wishes to can easily see what's happening if they just go out there. So I don't think a joint meeting is warranted either.
Thank you, Warren. Tom Gagan.
Tom Gagan agrees with both prior members' assessment of the plan. Have no exception to what's already been said.
Thank you, Tom. And Bob Wirtschafter?
Bob Wirtschafter agrees with the 3 before me.
And Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus agrees with everybody else. I've known that property for over 50 years. I'm sure I know what it looks like.
Okay, great. Roger Griffin?
Yeah, and Roger Griffin, I agree with everybody else. I'm good.
Okay, great. And Catherine, as I mentioned, I don't think a public hearing is necessary, and I don't think a group site visit is necessary either. So with all of that, could I have a motion to accept the pre-application?
No, this is Warren Chain. I so move that we accept the application.
Tom Gagan, second.
Thank you. So let's do a roll call vote, and this is to vote to accept the pre-application. Art Sprue.
Art Sprue, I approve.
Warren Chain.
Warren Chain, approve.
Tom Gagan.
Approve.
Bob Wirtschafter.
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Bob Dubus.
Bob Dubus, approve.
Roger Griffin.
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine, and I also approve that we accept this pre-application. Thank you, Thad.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. All right, so the next item on our agenda is a request for a recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And this is in regards to a driveway in a conservancy district for 155 and 157 Bridge Street. And do I have someone presenting for this matter?
David Clark here.
Thank you, David. Go ahead.
So this is a redevelopment of a property that has two single-family dwellings. One dwelling, 155, which is the westernmost dwelling, is entirely in the floodplain, and a large portion of the existing driveway is also within the floodplain. The applicants propose to tear down both houses and build new houses. The new house at 155 will be moved back from the top of the coastal bank. A significant amount, but will still be within the floodplain, or a portion of it is. Right now, there's about a little over 2,500 square feet of driveway within the Conservancy District. The new proposal is to eliminate about a little over 2,200 and reducing the driveway within the Conservancy District to a little over 300 square feet. The portion of the driveway within the Conservancy District will be pervious. That's it.
So, Dave, this is Catherine. Can you just clarify for me? I'm looking at the plans. So is it just that one little bit of the driveway, that little corner of the roundabout in the driveway that's in the Conservancy District? Is that correct? Could you show it with your pointer? Yes, okay. And that will be pervious. Now, what will the rest of the driveway be pervious? Or both driveways?
Most likely the turnaround will be pervious. They haven't made a decision yet on the rest of the driveway.
All right. So it's possible that the two new driveways that we see will be impervious, but they are not in the floodplain.
Correct.
All right, great. Great. So there are some other issues with this property, but I think specifically the planning board, the purview of the planning board for this is with respect to the driveway, specifically to the two new driveways. And there is only that small portion of the one driveway that's actually in the floodplain that will be of pervious material. And do we understand, David, that it's constructed to allow for the unobstructed flow of water?
Yes.
All right, great. So I'll just go through the board and see if anyone else has any questions or comments. Art Sprue.
Catherine, Art Sprue.
Yes, go ahead.
I guess I think David sort of answered the question that I was interested in. It was hard to tell, based on the proposed contours and the existing contours, if they were trying to meet the existing grade or not, whether it was in the Conservancy District or not. I'm just interested in how specific your design was to actually accomplish that.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I want to know if the proposed drive is matching existing grades as much as practical.
Within a foot or two.
Okay. The other thing is, on like 157, it's there's a positive outcome on this because there's a tennis court, which is I believe it's bituminous concrete, and it states that it's being removed. So that's a real positive outcome associated with this. I didn't have any other questions at this time, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Warren Chain, questions or comments for Dave?
Well, this is Warren Chain. No, I didn't really have any comments or questions, except maybe to make the observation again that the removal of the tennis court is a big plus. I think it would be preferred by the board, certainly by me, if the proposed driveways are permeable. But other than that, especially with the objective of moving things back from the coastal bank and getting them out of the floodplain, meeting all the zoning, it seems to me, a very good project.
Great. Thank you, Warren. Tom Gagan.
No comments.
Thank you. Bob Wirtschafter.
Yeah, I guess the only unknown to me is if the driveway was pervious, and now you're making it impervious, except for the 311 square feet. Are we getting enough? I just don't understand why we would take a pervious surface driveway and now make it impervious. That would be my concerns as well, even if it's outside the conservancy district, because I'm not really sure how making that impervious affects all the drainage everywhere else on the property.
Dave, did you want to respond to that?
We understand conservation. We're in the process of going through conservation, and we understand that conservation prefers pervious surfaces within their jurisdiction, but everything outside of conservation's jurisdiction and the conservancy district is entirely the purview of the homeowner. And so if it does get paved, we will, as required by the highway department, make provisions for drainage at the street.
Madam Chair, this is Bill Riley on behalf of Eastwood. I think David said that the entire circle is going to be pervious, probably shell, right, David?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not just the 311 square feet.
Right, and that's just for consistency purposes. But the straight line driveway out to Bridge Street, we haven't had any direction as to what that surface is going to be yet.
Okay, thank you. Bob Wirtschafter, do you have any other questions or comments? Okay, Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus has no questions.
Thank you. Roger Griffin?
Roger Griffin, I have no questions or concerns.
Thank you. This is Catherine. I think you've answered my questions. If I could suggest to the board that we make a motion, this basically meets our requirements. There are other matters that will be reviewed by the Zoning Board of Appeals, but I would suggest that we make a motion to send a positive recommendation to the Zoning Board of Appeals, provided that the portion of the driveway within the Conservancy District is made of pervious material and allows for the unobstructed flow of water. And if the board agrees, could I have that motion?
Bob Dubus, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
Roger, I'll second that motion.
All right, let's do a roll call vote. Art Sprue?
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain?
Warren Chain, approve.
Tom Gagan?
Approve.
Bob Wirtschafter?
Bob Wirtschafter, approve.
Bob Dubus?
Bob Dubus, approve.
Roger Griffin?
Roger Griffin, approve.
And this is Catherine. I also approve. So thank you very much, Dave and Bill. And we'll go on.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go on to our next item on the agenda. So the next item on our agenda is a long-range planning consideration. And this is in regards to our accessory dwelling unit bylaw. And Peter Farber is joining us. He has a suggestion for an amendment. I'd like to make a couple of comments before we begin. Just that I just wanted to remind the board that we worked quite a while on this accessory dwelling unit bylaw. Peter was a member of the board at the time that we did work on that, and it was passed at annual town meeting in 2019. The planning board also made a commitment, and I'm sure all of you remember this, that after a couple of years, we would, at least a couple of years, we would take a look at the bylaw and look at the response to the bylaw and consider whether any amendments would be useful or necessary or helpful. What I'd like to mention at this time is that it's been about 18 months that the bylaw has been in place. And I think, Ali summarized for you, we've had 3 applications. But I would suggest that it's because most of that 18 months has also been during the COVID situation, I would just want to suggest that it may be a bit early, a bit premature to take a look at reevaluating this bylaw and looking at amendments. That being said, Peter has something that he'd like to suggest. So I'd like to ask Peter to present his idea for your review. Please go ahead, Peter.
All right. Well, thank you, Catherine. Can you hear me and see me, everyone?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So my name is Peter Farber, and as Catherine mentioned, I served on the board up until, or just until I think the town meeting. Actually, I was on, my term ended just after the town meeting in 2019. And during the last few months, we spent a lot of time on the board discussing and revising, went through several revisions of the ADU bylaw, and town meeting accepted it as proposed. I think it was, as I remember, a pretty overwhelming vote in favor. And again, as Catherine mentioned, it's been about 18 months. During a great deal of that time, we have been under the pandemic. And of course, nobody can say how that's affected any applications. My comments are going to be towards the standalone ADUs. I understand, I believe that it's correct that there have been no by right permits issued. So my comments are to the standalone ADUs. Our experience has been 2 approved in that 18-month period. As I'm sure the board members remember, we put a cap of 10 for each calendar year. My personal belief was that we'd probably get 5, 6, maybe 7 a year. And of course, coming in with just 2 in an 18-month period is far from what I thought would happen. And I think the reason is that maybe we were too restrictive. As the board members will remember, we had every meeting, we had critical comments coming from the audience. So I think we were very careful to make sure that we had sufficient protections so that we could get this thing passed. And I think my comments today are going to be to suggest that we might want to consider, or the board might want to consider, revising one aspect of the ADU bylaw to hopefully increase the number of applications. I'm going to run through the protections that are in the bylaw presently, and I counted roughly 13, all 12 of which would remain in place if the proposed amendment were to be adopted by the board. So I've already mentioned that we have a cap of 10 special permits per calendar year. The ZBA must address all of the special permit criteria set forth in section 8C4. There are 10 of those. No use or dimensional variances are permitted. No more than 1 ADU on a lot. The ADU must be constructed in conformity with the state building code, Title V of the state environmental code, and all local Board of Health regulations and all provisions of the local zoning bylaw. The ADU must be clearly subordinate in use, size, and design to the principal dwelling on the lot. The ADU is restricted to 2 bedrooms. It's restricted to a habitable space not exceeding 900 square feet. At least 1 off-street parking space must be provided. An ADU, once constructed, may not be enlarged. The ADU must remain in common ownership with the principal dwelling. It cannot be sold or transferred apart from the principal dwelling. So that therefore the property cannot be condominiumized. So those, I I'm sure you weren't counting, but on my list, that's 12 conditions that we put on an ADU, a standalone ADU. The 13th condition is the one that I think may provide for some additional interest by the property owners in Chatham. And that is under subsection 4H. And that section of the bylaw places a condition that requires that the principal dwelling on the lot serve as the owner's principal residence. And I understand that one of the applications that for an ADU was withdrawn because it was not the owner's principal residence. If we remove this principal residence requirement, it would allow an ADU to be placed on a lot that is, let's say, for instance, owned by a family that may live up by Boston or may live in another state or somewhere else, and it doesn't serve as their principal residence. In other words, it serves as a seasonal residence. They come here in the summer, like so often happens in Chatham. But they may have an interest in putting an ADU on their lot, but cannot do so because it's not their principal residence. Eliminating this principal residence requirement, to me, would not cause any harm. And I'm not even sure why we inserted that provision. I think it was based on just a little bit of hesitation because we didn't want to be inundated with ADUs. And of course, that's why we put a cap of 10. But I think that when you think about it, the fact that the principal residence may not serve, the principal dwelling may not serve as the owner's principal residence. The only result, if we allow an ADU on such a lot, is that we would have an ADU occupied 12 months of the year by either the owner or another resident of Chatham, and the other dwelling, the principal residence or the principal dwelling, would remain vacant like so many summer homes do throughout the winter months. And I don't see any harm in that. Certainly the use of only one dwelling on a lot year round is better for the neighborhood than having two dwellings occupied on the same lot year round. So I think that is where I'm coming from. Obviously, when I look at the reasons why we as a town enacted this bylaw, it was to provide additional housing for households. I'm just looking at the beginning intent and purpose section of the bylaw. Additional opportunities for housing for all income levels, ages, and size of families, including those who are aging in place, and certainly would also allow for people who are having trouble finding affordable rental housing in Chatham. It would hopefully encourage ADUs to satisfy that intent. Based on that, I think that's pretty much where I'm coming from, and I would like the board to consider this amendment to the bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So why don't I go through the board and see if each one of you has comments to make or any questions. Art Sprue.
Art Sprue. Catherine, I recall some of the background associated with this. I think the concern that we had is that there is an as of right provision in this bylaw, and there is no opportunity for an abutter to actually do anything to comment or deal with any concerns that they may have. If you take and I think the concern that we had associated with that is that if somebody was going to be there in a rental all year long with the principal residence not being there, and there happened to be a unpleasant rental that is occurring there, there would be no recourse on what that abutter to do. The principal owner is not experiencing the issues, and we said that this is sort of a way to manage that aspect of it, especially with an as of right. So there was a background associated with this. This was a solution that we proposed at the time, and I think it makes sense. This is still too early in the process to make an adjustment like this, especially when you're talking about putting in a year-round rental with no one there present as part of the ownership of the property to understand and experience what's going on with that rental. So that's what I recall the background of the discussion of it. We can debate whether we still are comfortable with that. I think I'm still at this point, since it's so early in the process, to continue with what we have until we learn a little bit more. And I'd like to see what happens with some of these as of right, if they come in.
Thank you, Arthur. Warren Chain.
This is Warren. I think I have to support your position, Madam Chairman, that especially because of COVID-19, but even without that, I don't think enough time has gone by to adequately assess what the medium to long-term impact of the ADU bylaw is going to be. I certainly am aware from comments from friends, neighbors, as well as some of the public hearings, there was a great deal of opposition by a number of residents. I know an awful lot of time went into the development of the bylaw that was passed by town meeting. But I certainly would want more time to go by to have more data about the bylaw as passed, and I certainly would want it to be subject to public hearing to get a broader feedback from the community regarding any changes, but certainly this proposed change. Because as I read it, my expectation is that this would then become the way to help subsidize paying the taxes on the big house. Period. Notwithstanding the higher justifications for providing additional housing for medium and low-cost housing in town, and I'm not sure that providing a right for people to just help pay the taxes on the big house that they don't live in is necessarily something that would be supported by the town the way the ADU bylaw as written and passed was supported. But I do think the real issue here is there hasn't been enough time to determine exactly what the outcome would be given COVID-19. No other comments.
Thank you, Warren. Tom Gagan.
Thank you, Catherine. Tom, I agree with both Arthur's comments and Warren. I think it's too early, and I think the board in general would be abdicating some of its political concerns. There was a lot of feedback from the community in terms of need for control. If we start to, and I'm not suggesting that Peter says that we're whittling away at this control, but I think time has to go by, and we have to have our own board credibility that we have this bylaw in place for 18 months, and now we're altering it. And some of the opposition that I remember hearing at public meetings would take objection to this as a further means of not having control over the ADU bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Bob Wirtschafter.
Yeah, this is, I was probably closer to you, Peter, on this than I think the rest of the board was, but to be quite honest, your description of the infrequent visits to the main house is not really what might happen if we relax it in the way you've worded it, because it seems to me that that main house could become a bed and breakfast, could become a Airbnb, and would allow for that Airbnb to have a full-time sort of housekeeper in the ADU and be totally legit. So I think the idea, well, the person who owns it isn't there all the time, is not really all we're going to be opening up here if we take your wording. So I'm thinking that probably let's get some better wording. If you really believe that this is something that could happen, that both properties still need to be occupied on a 12-month basis, but the owner, it doesn't have to be the owner, perhaps, if we want to come halfway to where you're going. But I'm inclined to wait a while to do that, Peter.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. Bob Dubus?
Bob Dewis, I can see the thought process in this, and I am almost inclined to go wholeheartedly along with it, but I think that we should spend a little more time, maybe give it another year, and then visit it again and see how it's going. This is new and times are good, and let's see what happens a little bit more. I'm a little worried about only having the owner there occasionally and seeing the empty house sitting there when I'm sure that something else will come along.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Roger Griffin, any comments, questions?
Yes, I guess I think it's way too soon, and I think that change scares me. And I think we would lose a lot of support for the people that supported it so far. But I still think it's way too soon, but I would, even if it was 5 years, I don't think I would be able to support it with what, we don't know enough yet.
Okay. Thank you, Roger. This is Catherine. So at the beginning, I did make a comment that I felt I agree with my colleagues that it is too soon. The bylaw has only been in place about 18 months, and most of that time has been during COVID. So I agree that we should give this more time. Secondly, I just want to mention that I agree with some of the board members mentioned, and it's my memory that this particular point of having the property owner, having this be the principal residence of the property owner, was actually addressed some of the main concerns of the citizens of Chatham. And I am not convinced that changing that would be welcomed by the voters of Chatham. So that's another concern of mine, that it may not actually be a favorable point for passing it. Thirdly, as chair, I just want to mention, and Ali and I discussed this, as chair, I have to determine the priorities for the time of the planning board, how we use our time. And I just want to remind everyone, I think as you all know, that, again, because of COVID, we've had sort of limited ability to move ahead on a lot of things, but we do have a lot on our plate. So we have to consider what is the priority. We are working on the West Chatham zoning, but we have put on the back burner, we've put the massing of and scale of residential structures. But as soon as we can do that, we need to put that into motion again. We also do need to do work on the floodplain bylaw. That's something that's been, on the agenda for some time that needs some reworking. And also we have our subdivision rules and regulations and our site plan review criteria. So in terms of, and those are just the beginning, we also have the other neighborhood centers. So in terms of our long range planning, we do have a lot of other priorities that I would have to say we need to put first, and that it would make sense and it would be reasonable to give this a little more time, to give the ADU bylaw a little more time, and to monitor how it performs, and then to carefully consider in the future whether this particular amendment would be fruitful and if any other amendments are necessary. So those would be my comments. So Peter, I think from the board's comments, I think in general, everyone is in agreement that it's too soon to consider any amendments. And I think a couple of us have expressed some concerns about this particular amendment, but again, it's a little too soon to make a judgment. So with that said, I did want to thank you for thinking it through. And it's something that maybe we need to take a look at in the future. Would that be all right?
Of course, that's very fine.
Okay.
Thank you, Catherine, and all the members of your board for your carefully considered comments.
Okay.
Chairman, this is
Thank
Warren
you, Peter.
Chain. I had my hand up and wanted to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
ask
sorry,
your
Warren.
Question.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Warren. I did not see your hand. I apologize.
right.
Please go ahead.
Well, Peter, Warren Chain. Just so for clarity of my thinking, I'd appreciate your comments with regard to the proposed rewording that you have presented to us. What restrictions would there be on a principal residence that was not occupied, but the ADU was 12 months a year? It's not clear to me whether there would be any restrictions on the principal residence being rented out seasonally, monthly, bed and breakfast type renting. But I'm not sure that that is your intent, but it's not clear. Would you comment?
Yes. Well, first of all, a couple times I made an error. I think it's very clear that what I'm trying to say is distinguish between principal dwelling on the lot and the principal residence of the owner. So just so we're clear there, that at this point, the principal dwelling, which of course would in most, if not all cases, be the larger house, presently under the bylaw, that must serve as the owner's principal residence, meaning he or she must live there, well, be a voter of Chatham, a resident of Chatham, all that goes with the term principal residence. If we remove that, then it could be open unless it was further restricted. But if it were not further restricted, it could be open to rentals. But the purpose I think that we had from the beginning was that there only be one rented property when there's an ADU, and that be on the lot. Only one could be rented to a person other than the owner. So I don't know, is that clear, Warren, or did I confuse you even more?
I actually probably misspoke when I used the term principal residence. I should have been talking, are there any restrictions on the principal dwelling?
Right.
And I'm not sure that I am in favor necessarily of essentially removing the restrictions that are on the principal dwelling, as in the bylaw that was passed, and essentially opening that up to becoming a rental property, short-term,
Right.
medium-term, long-term, whatever. And it seems to me that's not at all in accordance with many of the comments that I recall being made by town residents at the time. But again, I do think that's trumped by the fact that I think it's too soon to see what we get from the current wording. And I think that's colored by COVID-19 as much as anything else. But thank you very much. Appreciate the clarification.
Thank you. And I see Allie's hand is up.
Sorry, I just wanted to quickly say, Catherine, I'm not sure if you want to ask if there's any public comment on this.
Yes. No, thank you for reminding me. I did have that in mind. So I will ask if there's anyone connected to the call. Warren, do you still have your hand up or is it not up? So I did just want to ask if there is anyone connected to the call from the public who has questions or comments on this matter. I don't see anyone. Any other comments from the board before we move to close the meeting?
Tom Gagan,
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Peter, was awfully nice to see you again. Stay well, be well. I love that smile of yours. And don't give up on us.
Yeah,
Thank you, Tom.
great. Thank you, Tom.
Catherine Artsbrew.
Yes, Arthur, go ahead.
I'd like the long list of long-range planning pieces that you commented on is a full agenda. I'd like to make a plea to the board and to you as chair that we at least increase the priority of the rules and regulations. It's near and dear to me as an engineer. The content that I like to see on applicants and what they submit, we can do it in phases. I'd be more than interested in being a champion on this. At some point this year, I'd like to just move it higher in the priority list on the agenda. That's just my personal preference and wish.
Okay, great. Thank you, Arthur. I think a very good point. We're with you on that one. Any other comments from any matter we've discussed tonight from members of the public who are connected?
Catherine, may I ask a question, Tom Gagan?
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
I've noticed in my travel around the two new rotary constructions, has there been any input to the town planner, or any boards or committees about that general construction? I know we're going to take up the West Chatham Village area at some point. My question is a concern of safety that I've been encountered in trying to get to the post office from one of the rotaries. Has there been any, does Ally know of, or do you know of any general comments from the public about trying to navigate either of those two rotaries? Because I know we're going to be talking about the West Chatham Village area.
Yeah, this is Catherine. I'll just comment. I mean, first of all, the roadway project is a separate but related issue to our consideration of the West Chatham zoning. So I just wanted to make that point. I haven't received any public comment. We'll ask Ally if she's received any public comment on the West Chatham roadway construction.
Sorry, this is Ally. I personally have not received any comment. I do know that the Board of Selectmen has, and I was just trying to quickly look at their agenda. I think tomorrow night they actually might be discussing that, but before I tell you for certain, let me just take a quick look at their agenda.
Okay. So Ally will check the Board of Selectmen agenda. It might be on for tomorrow night, Tom. And that might be a way to get any information that's come in or that's under consideration.
Catherine Artsbrew.
Yes, please go ahead, Arthur.
While we're on the Route 28 project, interesting what I've noted on there. I recall numerous times that it was shown on the cross section that there was going to be, from the back of curb, a 5-foot buffer strip where they were going to have some tree plantings and light fixtures and that. You're lucky if there's 2 feet there, so I have no idea what they build versus what was noted on the plans in the cross sections, but certainly it's much less of a strip than what we were led to believe. So it's neither here nor there, but that's the way it exists right now, and they're not going to do anything to change it. It's sort of disappointing because if there was any opportunity to put trees on the north side, it would have been in a buffer strip that was 5 feet wide. Quite frankly, it starts to become problematic now when it's only 2 feet.
Okay, good. Thank you, Arthur. And again, Ally, do we have information?
Yep, Catherine, I just took a look at the Board of Selectmen's agenda for tomorrow night, and at 6:30 p.m. they'll be discussing the West Chatham roadway project. with the MassDOT District 5 representatives to attend.
Great. Thank you, Ally. So Tom and actually Arthur, I encourage you to connect to the Board of Selectmen meeting about the West Chatham Roadway, which will be tomorrow at 6:30, and for information and also to pass along your concerns. But that would be the proper place to pass along any questions or concerns.
Thank you to both of you.
Arthur, go ahead.
Catherine Zartsbrew, I was going to participate in that and
Yeah.
see if there was an opportunity to speak. And I'll bring up a couple of comments, but I'm not hopeful that MassDOT's going to do anything.
Yeah. But Arthur, I think you should bring up the comments anyway. I think that's you're also you were the representative on the committee who went to meet with MassDOT, so I think that would be appropriate.
Yeah, that's a good point. I might bring up what was agreed to at that meeting and see if they recall the same thing that the several of us who attended that meeting recall. Thank you.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, any other comments from the board or comments from the public on any matters we've discussed tonight? There being none, I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, may I have a second?
Warren Chain, I second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Art Sprue,
Art Sprue, approve.
Warren Chain,
Warren Chain, approve.
Tom Gagan,
Tom Gagan, approve.
Bob Wirtschafter,
Wirtschafter, approve.
Bob Dubus,
Bob Dubus, approve.
Roger Griffin,
Roger Griffin, approved.
and this is Catherine Halpern. I also approve that we adjourn the meeting, and it is 6:18 p.m. So thank you again, everyone, for participating. Again, it's good to see everyone after the holidays. Our next planning board meeting is the 25th, and I think that meeting is scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for participating, and have a good evening.